welcome Ryan Shea to the podcast of the Yale Forum on Religion Ecology. It's called Spotlights because we try to put the spotlight on people who do work at the intersection of religion and ecology. And that's exactly the kind of stuff you're doing at the Nature Institute. So, really happy to have you on. We've chatted before. Love your work. Introduce yourself to the people.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Sam. So, as you said, my name's Ryan Shea, and I'm a full-time researcher educator here at the Nature Institute in Ghent, New York. It's upstate New York, about 2.5 hours straight north of Manhattan, right near the town of Hudson. So, Hudson River Valley, where all the Hudson River Valley painters are. So, that's where I'm located right now. I've been at the Nature Institute full time. It'll be 2 years this September.
Oh,
And for a couple years before that, I had been part time. My family was living in the area. And then before that, I was a full time visiting assistant professor of philosophy and interdisciplinary humanities. We taught kind of across the board at Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. So that was the what I did for about a decade before coming out here to the Nature Institute. Um, how much more do you want to hear?
well, that was a good intro. That's a good question. That was a good intro. Um, you know, what I'd like to hear is infinitely more. Because I just that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I just get to know amazing folks who are doing amazing work, and you definitely are in that category. But good intro. I gotta hear before we get into the Nature Institute. How did you find yourself into a position where your like philosophical and like religious or spiritual perspective converged with these kind of ideas? Because it's still the case today that a lot of people, when they think of environmental issues, they think of them as primarily scientific problems or maybe technological issues, maybe it's policy, but a lot of people still don't think it's about your philosophy or your spirituality or so that intersection is very curious to me.
Hmm.
How did you personally find yourself at that weird intersection?
Yeah, good. Yes, that that question does invite an infinitely longer answer.
Right.
Yeah, so the shorter version of the longer story is so I was raised in the Midwest standard Midwest style in Wisconsin. Whatever
Ah.
picturing that to mean, that's what it meant. I was surrounded on three sides by corn every year, and the fourth side by dairy cows. And my dad was a general contractor, so I knew
Uh,
farmers and people in the trades. So very standard. I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, a small, if you know anything about it, a small niche evangelical Christian Protestant sect, and spent a lot of time in the natural world and but was the idea of being interested in nature is not really a Midwestern attitude. Everybody is in, right? So people go hunting, people are out in the woods, but very few would identify as being interested in nature.
yeah.
That seems more of a city attitude. And I mean, this has been pointed out, right, in the history of you tend to get the bucolic and nature poetry after civilization has
Right.
solidified. And so it was just sort of taken for granted when people ask me now, like, were you interested in nature when you were young? Like, well, I was always outside, but so was everybody. That's
Right.
just what one did. And then, yeah, so a relatively standard Midwestern, small evangelical Protestant upbringing. And then when I was in high school, so I was around 15 or 16, I was going through the requisite, spiritual crisis one goes through when one's 15 or 16, and just trying to find people that could help me work through this. And I came through a series of accidents. Through C.S. Lewis, I came to Owen
Oh,
Barfield's work.
oh.
So Owen Barfield is one of the very unknown inklings, along with the much more famous C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. And Lewis and Tolkien often attribute to Barfield some of their more central, deeper uh, philosophical realizations and connections. And so I came across this book, Poetic Diction, by Owen Barfield through a recommendation from C.S. Lewis's book Miracles, and where he Lewis said something like, it in a chapter on imagination, Lewis said, I'm going to treat this in somewhat a shallow way if anybody wants to really understand in a deeper way what imagination is. And
Hmm.
in fact, if they want to learn what it means to think deep and well about anything at all, I would recommend to them, and Edwin Bevan's Symbolism and Belief was one of them, and the other one was Owen Barfield's Poetic Diction. So I went out to the library and immediately got Owen Barfield's Poetic Diction. I devoured that, and then that led me to all of the rest of Barfield's canon, and especially this his work, Saving the Appearances, and his work on what Coleridge thought, uh, introduced me to this idea that the imagination could be a, as Goethe would say, that I'll come to in a minute, as Goethe would say, an organ of perception, a
Yeah.
participatory organ of experiential perception of the natural world.
Yeah.
And that this was an accomplishment, not that we do it somewhat all the time, but we don't do it very well, but that there was a path of training of the imagination which had always been recognized by artists and poets, but that what Barfield and Coleridge were promising, and what Barfield said the Romantic tradition as a whole was striving to realize, was this central hope that the imagination could become a mediating organ for the
Yeah.
human and the world,
Yeah.
between our sensation and our thinking, but also between the human being and the more than human world. And so Barfield just kept saying things like that. And he would, when he would bring them up, he would usually mention the name Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the great German playwright and poet, the polymath poet and scientist. And so, what's very unknown is that Goethe spent as much of his time doing science as he did doing what we would call arts or
Yeah.
humanities. And what Barfield was picking up on is that Goethe was already the embodiment of what Romanticism was hoping to achieve in the future.
Mhm.
So he came at the sort of the entry point of Romanticism, and
Right.
was sitting there as an accomplished promise that then was, is very strange, his reception, simultaneously extremely well known and
Yeah.
very unwell known, right?
Right.
Unpicked up, let's
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And so so I discovered these ideas when I was, yeah, 15, 16. And it was extremely, and I remember reading Barfield and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about or what that looks like or
Right.
how one would do that. But that is what I would like to dedicate my life to. And so, now that I'm at the Nature Institute, when certain things happen in your life, the past of what you've gone through will reconfigure itself into your new story. So now I'm currently living a very simple story where I found this when I was in my teens and then struggled to pursue it in various ways. I went to a great books college, Thomas Aquinas College out there in California. And then I did a master's work in philosophy at the Catholic University of America. And as I mentioned, I taught at Providence College for years and was constantly striving to figure out, how do you how do I pursue a way of being phenomenologically engaged and uh, careful with the living natural beings around me,
Right.
and how do I help to communicate that and also inculcate that in others.
Right.
When I wasn't at the Nature Institute, it's very hard to explain that. And now I can just say, oh, I sort of discovered it when I was young, and now I found the there are other places that are there are some other places, but really it isn't that much of an exaggeration to say that the Nature Institute is currently the only institution in the English speaking world that is entirely independent and entirely dedicated to the practice of Goethean phenomenology of nature research. That's all we do. And so I found this like niche vocational calling when I was young, and then through a series of life circumstances over 22 years found my way into the one eco niche that fit my particular uh, outfitting of preparation and interests.
Nice. I love that. Well, and I gotta say, especially to anybody listening who's looking for their own vocation,
Yeah.
it's like that's how you do it. It's like you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs. And so you read somebody, and when that person says, well, this is the guy I was reading, and this is who I was reading, this is who I was reading, and you kind of follow it back. And I love that approach.
Mm-hmm.
You follow the references, you follow the citations, and
Yep.
then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, this. Uh, I gotta admit, I'll admit it. Used to call him Goth when I
That's
when I
the
was younger.
it
I was
is
like,
the
who's this Goth guy? And
yeah,
then like, oh, it's Goethe. Especially it's tough because the OE thing is like hard in American English,
yeah.
Goethe. But so yeah. Anyway, he's the source of so much brilliance. And really appreciate like kind of tracing it back. And you're like, well, they keep saying this. Well, this person's saying that. Well, I'm gonna need to read this person.
Mhm.
And so I love that approach. And I feel like still to this day he's very underappreciated.
Mhm.
Um, and so along those lines, that's what you're doing at the Nature Institute, right? Is trying to bring his ideas and his perspective, his method, into light a little bit more.
Yeah, and well, yeah, I'll say two things. One, part of the reason I spent time going through my own biography, even though I find it excruciatingly boring to think about myself,
Yeah, well,
it
it's
is
boring to you. It's interesting to others.
right. But what's part of the reason that I think it's so important is exactly what you just said. And I talk to a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, and I'm constantly reiterating because at this point of if you have found something, and by finding something, it's usually kind of like an inchoate feeling and desire of what you're trying to get to, and even to say what you love is a little. It can be too trite. It's
Right.
something. So, yeah, something like a vocation where you feel a call.
Yeah.
Something's pulling you to something, and then they're very reasonably overwhelmed by saying, well, but how nobody's doing that. How would I make that work? How can I make money? How would this be practicable? And in a more radical sense, that they're saying, but nobody's doing that. Where's this network? Where's the work done? And what I find more and more is there are actually things around. This is what's so wonderful to me
Mm,
about your work and the Yale Forum's work in general and other similar institutions is just shining a spotlight on all of these different places. And that so much of what one wants to say, that would have what I would want to say to young people is, and by young, I mean like 20 to
I know.
60. Um,
We are old people.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. By
Is
young, I
latch
mean,
on and keep looking. And the second thing I would want to say on that same really uh, encouraging aspect. The Nature Institute was started in 1998 by a husband and a wife, Craig Holdridge and Henrika Holdridge.
Hmm.
They had friends that helped them a lot, and then their friend and colleague Steve Talbot joined them soon on afterwards. So that, but it was three people.
Hmm.
So it was three people and a vision.
Hmm.
That's what the Nature Institute was 25 years. And
Wow.
then and then John McAllis came on, and then I came on recently. Another couple colleagues have been joining, but really it was a really initially it was a husband and a wife and a vision that they held. And to see what was able to be accomplished by them and Steve Talbot, just three people in a vision, is really quite remarkable, and I think very encouraging for people to say, yeah, so hold on to a vision
Yep.
and go for it.
Yep. Man, isn't that the best advice? Uh, and really reflects not just Goethe, but all of Romanticism in general.
Yeah.
Is like there's a vision. I was talking to somebody recently, one of the folks who lives on the farm here with me, and they were kind of in a difficult mood, I would say. And the thing was lacking a vision. And it's like I just don't feel my vision. And so, we'll see how that goes. It's complicated, but it is one of those things like it's the vision that drives your practice.
Mm-hmm.
Or as Thomas Berry says, it's the dream that drives your perspective on reality. So you need a dream, you need a vision,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of people are willing to do a lot of hard work, but when you don't have a vision of where that work is going, it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'd love to hear more. What is the vision of the Nature Institute?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
what is it? Because man, I just really feel like people are hungry for it, and when they're not getting it, they end up buying into other visions that are not good visions. I'm not gonna name names, but there's some bad visions out there. And so
Yeah.
they end up buying into stuff that's basically propaganda or whatever. So yeah, so what is that vision?
Yes. Wonderful question. I'd say the a quote Goethe. So on our handout pamphlet, we have a quote from Goethe that serves as the, let's say, the motto of the Nature Institute, which is, if we want to know nature in a living way, we must follow her example and become as mobile and malleable as nature herself.
Mm,
So, in order to know nature in a living way, you must become as mobile, as dynamic, and as malleable, as flexible, as pliable, as shapeable, as sculptable as nature herself. And so, you could say that the core vision will often use the word phenomenology, this careful attending to the way that natural beings show up. And so I'm looking out my window right now, out into the backyard of the Nature Institute. So there's a little field um, filled with a bunch of white clover, and right now, uh, what else is out there? A bunch of white clover.
mm.
There's a bunch of honeybees. Um, there's a bunch of yarrow that's just coming into flower.
Oh, nice.
There's a bunch of bird's foot trefoil, which has still flowering, and the the vision of the Nature Institute, I would say, is that you are dedicating and um, yeah, disciplining yourself to phenomenon. And
Mm,
by phenomenon, so phenomenon comes from phino, something to shine or to show forth.
right.
So a phenomenon in I think in the Goethean tradition is slightly differentiated from more mainstream Edmund Husserl type tradition is when
Right.
we speak of phenomenon, the the emphasis that one hears in that word at the Nature Institute is the beings of the world come to particular forms of encounterability
Right.
when they are in the moment that they are actually being encountered by another being that's able to enter into a relational encounter with them. The name for that encounter is phenomenon.
Mm,
So when and different beings come into all sorts of different um, manifestations. So right now, so I work a lot with plants and insects, and I've been working a lot with metamorphosis in insects, really
mm,
focusing on the this interrelationship between monarchs and milkweed. So
mm.
when you say monarch, when we say the word monarch butterfly, I imagine most of us imagine an adult flying around, right? A very with their strikingly orange black coloration, their large wings, their gliding tendency, somewhat reminiscent of the raptor birds. Their little white
Right.
spots visiting different flowers,
Yep.
which is one manifestation. That's one way in which a monarch comes to presence. But a monarch, whatever one wants to call it, a monarch being um, also comes to presence as an egg. It also comes to presence as a caterpillar. And as being a caterpillar, the larval stage of a butterfly, it goes through five molts. So it goes through and manifests five different ways.
Mm.
Then it pupates. Actually, I have one right next to me that just pupated last week that I'm
Aw.
looking at. The chrysalis with this famous jewel-like emerald case with the black, white, yellow band running around the top and the smooth, yeah, emerald-like surface. And then after 2 weeks, emerging from that is what we would normally think of as the monarch butterfly. All of those are manifestations of monarch.
Yep.
And so the that insists and to then you get this challenge. And I bring this up because this is, I mean, this is literally what I was working on before we had this conversation. I'm in the middle of trying to really think in this way that Goethe and Barfield and the Romantics spoke about. How do you cultivate your imagination to be able to enter into those different phenomenon or manifestations as egg, as different molts, as different instars? It has its different behaviors so that the caterpillar eats leaves and is in a two-dimensional leaf environment, but the butterfly is a creature of wings and flight and air and warmth and siphons up nectar and no longer eats leaves, so has entered into an entirely different um, umwelt as Jakob, as an environment. It's they're in that sense different worlds,
Yeah.
and so when you speak about the monarch's relationship to its environment, that is also the relationship between the organism and the environment metamorphoses along with the metamorphosis of the monarch organism.
Right.
And so these things, just as you attend to it, right? It's in its caterpillar molting stage for about 2 weeks. It's in a chrysalis stage for about 2 weeks, and then it's in its imago stage for different times and uh, different life cycles because we don't need to get into it, but famously the monarch migrates.
Right.
So there's one imago adult stage of the monarch where they will, the ones up by us, right? We're really high north in the US, they'll migrate all the way down to a place, this mountain range outside of Mexico City.
Oh.
And a single imago will migrate down there, overwinter there for about 4 months, and then start migrating back up and lay eggs in the southern United States. So those imagos are alive for about over 6 months, but the other
Huh.
ones that just go through their life cycle up here are only alive for a few weeks and then
Hmm.
mate and reproduce. And so holding all of those phenomenal manifestations, and our the reason we use the word phenomenology is we're constantly holding back from giving an explanation, which is striving to go behind into something other than what you are encountering, that tries to simply say, well, what's really going on here is actually this totally different story.
Right.
So putting it in that way, you're trying to understand. So for me, I'm trying to understand the monarch butterfly on its own terms. Its terms
Yeah.
are its forms, its patterns, its shape, its morphology, a term that Goethe actually coined, morphology, and the way that it is in an active behavioral way, or its ethology in the world,
Yeah.
which includes this mystery of metamorphosis as well. So staying with it long enough so that it starts to reveal itself to the a type of experience that is enabled by imagination and not
Hmm. Hmm.
reducible to intellectual explanation. That
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the vision.
Man. Yeah. Beautifully said. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but that was beautifully said. You know, I don't even know where to start with that. One, I really appreciate this definition of phenomenology. Like you were saying, this is not kind of the thing that came out of Edmund Husserl. And you know, the term phenomenology was coined by a friend of Immanuel Kant, and
Mm-hmm.
it's mutated so much. But I love this idea that basically you're trying to describe appearances and not explain them away. And so just want to give a shout out to that, that there's a way to talk about things where you describe them and don't give the background explanation. You're just like, I'm just trying to describe it. But also metamorphosis, that kind of attention to detail. Like, I love that a lot. I just wonder, not to get too personal about it, but that's so beautiful. How does that weigh on you? Like emotionally or psychologically? Um, because even, yeah, I won't get into too much of my personal life, but I was just walking out earlier and saw some pigs on my farm, and I just started crying. Because they're just so beautiful. They're pigs. and, and I come back and my wife sees me and she's like, "Oh, Sam." And I was like, "Oh yeah." I just have tears streaming down my cheek. I'm like, "I just saw pigs. It wasn't a but there's such a reverence for this kind of stuff." And I think sometimes when people think of phenomenology, they think it's, I mean, again, not to throw Husserl under the bus here, uh, but they think it's very much just a rational pursuit. And
Mm-hmm.
they forget about the emotional part, the affective part. So, yeah, so I got it, like, this is just for me. Like, how do you deal with that? When you get this close to nature, it's got to weigh on you in a certain way. And I don't mind crying when I see pigs and feeling that moment of reverence of just seeing them just being pigs, not doing anything particularly remarkable. Uh, but it's enough where something in my like emotional being is just like, oh, and it's relief maybe, sadness maybe. I don't know what it is, but how has that changed you doing this kind of work? Because it's I mean it's intense. It's different than somebody who's just like, I'm an environmental scientist and I test water quality in this area, or but like that's got to hit you pretty hard to be that connected to a kind of living earth community.
Yeah. And this is Yes. Well, and part of the, I mean, yes. And when you enter, the advantage of being objective is that you're not overwhelmed. One of the
Right.
advantages of being
Right.
objective is that you're not completely overwhelmed by everything all the time
Yeah.
because you've kept yourself out of it. Because
Yeah.
if you got too much into anything, I mean, even in our interpersonal conversations with people, we have all of our rules and mores about how much you disclose because a lot of things are private. And part of the reason for that is there's just a lot of tragedy in most people's lives. And if you knew
Yeah.
about it, you would be constantly overwhelmed by that.
Yeah.
You develop a capacity for holding this space with all of its implications for the things that you actually can. And so I think a large part of what I think is so beautiful about the work of the Goethean tradition and of the Nature Institute in particular is, in a way, it's much smaller.
Mm.
That phenomenology, in the way that I think we strive to practice it here, is on the intellectual realm, you're not going beyond what you have immediate experience of.
Mm.
So you're not snooping, you're not jumping to conclusions, you're not trying to invent speculative, enormous models. And in a way, yeah, it's still, I think maybe those things have a place, maybe, but it's whether or not they do needs to be like a very serious, careful, slow conversation. And if one would call Goethean phenomenology of nature Goethean science, this term is often used.
Mm.
The primary characteristic of it would be slow science, that you got
Mm.
to slow a lot of things down. And I think in that same way, a slow environmentalism in
Mm.
the the director and co-founder Craig Holdridge, um, who I work with a lot. He's my mentor because he's works mostly with plants and animals. So he helps me do that better. He wrote a book called Thinking Like a Plant, and the last chapter is called A Quiet Revolution.
Mm.
That the there's a revolutionary tendency, but it's slower. And so these terms like metamorphosis will often be this. Goethean Fred Amrine once wrote an article called The Metamorphosis of the Scientist,
Mm.
right? Going back to this quote, if we would know nature in a living way, we must become like nature, mobile, malleable, flexible. But that means you're working with it, as you said, with your encounter with the pigs. If you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You get fully into it, and the immediate thing that you realize there is the smallness of the sphere of good influence that you can have. It's actually
Mm.
really easy to be influential in a bad way in a gigantic sphere.
Right.
It's very easy to be destructive on a large scale.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to be honing care for something. So the Nature Institute's
Yeah.
very small, right? It used to be a house. There's a handful of people here. We just had our foundation course, the first meeting of them, this big year-long course that we have where people are here for 2 weeks, intensive in person, and there were 20 people here.
Hmm.
And 20 people feels like a lot to have because the intensity that you're working with, they had a week where they were working with optical phenomenon, with shadows and light and colors,
Mm.
and getting into, as you're just, the moral quality so that you actually feel uh, morally connected with colored shadows.
Hmm.
And the second week on plants, but to hold a space with more than 20 people with that kind of intensity, you realize, well, you would have to kind of pull back on the actual responsibility that you have. The
Right.
grounds are somewhat small. And so, sorry, this is a long winded answer
Oh
to your
no. No, this is
question,
great.
which is phenomenology is yeah, you could say it's this whole person Martin Buber type I thou encounter with the things that you're coming to, where you're trying to hold nothing back, and you're fully committed to, I want to use the word subordination, to disciplining yourself to
Mm.
the other beings having space to be seen as what it is and heard as what it is.
Mm. Nice.
And that's a very intense discipline, and you become very devoted to the particular beings that you encounter,
Right.
and you realize the limits of that, right?
Right.
That one can only have so many friends, one can only have,
Yeah.
right, so many houses, maybe one is enough. And in this way too, one can only have so many places where you develop a real intimacy with other parts, with other beings in the natural world. And so,
Hmm.
right, making it smaller than Gaia, making it smaller than the totality of everything, and maybe you're in that network and relationality, but what you can actually relate to within that is always going to be much smaller and more intimate. So even
Hmm.
so in the Goethean phenomenology is very associated with the Waldorf school system. So Craig was a Waldorf biology teacher for many years.
Oh.
And Enrico was involved in Waldorf. John McAllis, who's full time here, um, was very
Huh.
involved in Waldorf.
Huh.
And so this head, heart, and hands, because the
Yeah.
question you were asking was, so if Husserl gives you a head phenomenology intimacy, and something like agriculture and gardening and activism give you a hands intimacy, there's also this center rhythmic heart imagination intimacy where you're
Yeah.
actually uh, you care,
Yeah.
you're working out of care.
Yeah.
And phenomenology is, you could say, it's the careful limitation of all of those things, of what you can know, of what you can love, and what you can do.
Mm. That's good. And that's a long journey from the head to the heart to the hands. It's it's not easy by any means. But, we have exactly these kind of institutions, right? So I don't know if somebody's listening to this and they want to get involved with what you're doing. How do we hang out? Like you said, like even just 20 people there is kind of a lot. So it's
Mhm.
small, but the intimacy is what makes it so effective. And so that's great. How do folks get involved with this? Whether in their personal life or with the Nature Institute more specifically. But it's such important work and so effective and so beautiful. So like how to what would you recommend to people?
Yeah. I mean, for us immediately, right, we have our website, natureinstitute.org. There's a bunch of old free resources on there. We have a publication called In Context that we put out twice a year in spring and fall. All the back issues are available for free on the website as PDFs. We have a podcast called In Dialogue with Nature, where one can, yeah, go through and get kind of a sense of this work. And the culmination of it is what Craig following Goethe often calls portrayals. That Goethe had this
Hmm.
line that when trying to get this deeper understanding of the world, you should strive not to explain but to portray. And so we just put out two really short podcasts recently, one by Craig Holdridge and one by Steve Talbot, the two of the co-founders, that are very short, very concentrated articulations of the core of mission.
Hmm.
So one's called Characterize, Don't Divine, and one's called
Hmm.
To Explain or Portray. So
Hmm.
I'd recommend just listening to those. And if you say, man, that's a really interesting articulation, like this reaction I had to Barfield, what does that look like? Craig has two books, a plant book called Thinking Like a Plant, and then an animal book called Seeing the Animal Whole, where he strives to just give a series of portraits of what this looks like, of how would you, um, if you were wanting to come to see in a more holistic, experiential, participatory way the slothness of a sloth.
Hmm.
He has a portrait where he's striven to do that, where he tries to write in a way
Cool.
where it's disclosive and he describes in such a way so that the hope is that the sloth comes to presence for the reader in its slothness, in it that it becomes, or the reader help, makes the tries to develop the ability to hear the sloth on its own terms.
Hmm.
And so a huge amount of the old resources that we have on the Nature Institute are just attempts to do that work
Right.
in given instances. And so I would highly recommend that. Our foundation course is our big 15-month, that's sort of our flagship program now. It only runs every other year. So the first cohort just started. The next one won't even start until 2028.
Oh, okay.
We're starting or continuing some online offerings that'll be announced probably tomorrow.
Hmm.
So July, by the time this goes out, they'll be live, where John Goldthorpe, our California colleague, will be hosting online seminars to help people who are basically in this situation. They're interested and they want to get in deeper to get to the point that the experiential and artistic practices could be seeds planted in cultivated soil.
Right.
And so all of the resources that we have on there are all freely available. And I mean, the last thing I'd say is we're a very small institution. I'm very excited to hear from anybody. People can feel more than free to just email me directly. My email's on there. It's just Ryan.Shea at natureinstitute.org. So reach out and I would be happy to connect people with any smaller other resources that I know about. But my immediate, you said where to start. I would say listen to a few of the podcasts to get a sense of it. And Craig has an article that he wrote many years ago called Doing Goethean Science, which
Hmm.
really is, I think, quite masterful.
Hmm.
He gives a beautiful, uh, yeah, like descriptive portrayal of what the work here is, and then does it by exemplifying it, working with this plant that he loves, the skunk cabbage,
Hmm.
that grows up in this wetlands that we take care of down the road from us. So that's a wonderful place to start. And then his book, Thinking Like a Plant, is really written as kind of a book form of a workshop.
Oh,
And
okay.
so in reading through it, he's really trying to help. He's not just telling you what's up here, he's trying to guide the reader into ways that they might take this up themselves.
Oh, nice. I like that a lot. That's one of those things where I'm like, man, I should have written something like that. So yeah, I appreciate that a bunch. And yeah, those are a lot of good entry points into this kind of work, which is so important right now. I mean, obviously because of biodiversity, climate change, etc., like this work is more important than ever. So I really appreciate it. And I gotta ask, what's next? What do you got going on? What's the future looking like
For me or for the whole
for
book?
you or for the Institute? Both. I'm more interested in you. No offense to the Institute, uh, but you're the one here, and you're representing that perspective so well. And so I just wonder, like, when you're doing this kind of stuff, I mean, the future is a complicated problem. Uh, personally, politically, etc. But yeah, I'm just curious of like your trajectory. So yeah, what are you thinking for I don't know the next year? Got a 10-year plan, 30-year plan, whatever. some folks are, well, you have to have a 10,000 year plan.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
so
70,000th generation. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, just wondering what are you envisioning on the horizon?
Yeah, and thank you for asking. I mean, so as I said, I my particular interest is this interrelationship between plants and insects. Just on their
Right.
own, they're for a bunch of reasons, they're intrinsically marvelously fascinating.
Yeah.
And then in like just metric number sorts of ways, plants, depending on the estimate, is somewhere between 80 and 83% of the biomass of living things on Earth. Um, 70, it depends on the estimate because
Right.
bacteria are also growing. Let's say 75% to be safe, but definitely a large majority of the biomass are plants. They're
Yeah.
everywhere all around, and they tend to be neglected
Yeah.
as types of living things. And insects are not neglected, but they tend to be despised. We call the thing that kills them pesticide because it kills pests.
Yeah.
And they're in, I mean, precipitous cataclysmic decline
Yeah.
across the board. And they are also by far the most species rich type of living thing by orders of
Right.
magnitude.
Right.
And these two beings are thus the most uh, multitudinous and magnitudinous types of living things we have around, and they have this intimate interconnection with each other ecologically and evolutionarily. And they're also particularly fascinating because they're so closely interconnected, and yet they're so utterly different from each other in the
Mm.
way, in like every aspect of the way that they live. And so part of what's
Mm.
so interesting to me is not just how, so monarch and milkweed is this sort of exemplar pair that I'm focusing on, not just how do they interact in regular ecological ways, but you could say, how does the way of being and acting of a milkweed as a plant differ from and thereby illuminate the way of being and acting and changing of a monarch.
Mm.
And so, in not just seeing them as interacting, survival maximalizing machines,
Right.
but as different ways of being that are mutually co-illuminating. And so
Right.
that's I would be happy if my 30-year plan was just if 30 years from now I had a deeper direct experiential grasp and like penetration into and participation in some interconnections between different plants and insects that are around me here in upstate New York, I would be happy with that. That would be more than enough. And on this other side of outreach and the sorts of people that would be listening to this podcast, I've become more and more excited about focusing, one could say, on the research aspect of this work
Mm.
more than the education and outreach aspect. Those are
Mm.
absolutely essential. But there are also a lot of other people that want to do that work, and that work just needs to be done everywhere all the time.
Right.
And there's so few people who are interested in really entering into this kind of really challenging, um, careful, precise, exacting, demanding way of working. There just aren't very many people out there. So if anybody is interested in that and listening to this, please email me and we will have a conversation. But one of the things that's so amazing about what the Nature Institute has done is, again, three people and the amount of just research that has been done and that has been made available through the publications is immense.
Mm.
And to continue that so that one isn't pitching a general manifesto of principles or insisting that we need a paradigm change. Absolutely, we do. Um, but what, even in the Kuhnian sense of paradigm, his initial sense of paradigm was an accomplishment. Some
Right.
scientists made a specific concrete accomplishment, and then it was unclear exactly how it worked, but it was so clear that it was getting at something that
Yeah.
others then started trying to pick it up and do it. And I think this is what's so powerful about Henrico's work and Craig's work and Steve's work and John's work, that it's providing exemplary instances of an accomplishment that
Hmm.
when you enter into it, the first thing you experience is, oh, this is working. This is helping me enter into the depths of another being more than I thought you could do. I don't understand how it's working or even
Right.
how we can do it,
Right.
but that's the initial impulse.
Yeah.
That's the initial reaction and response, and why people want to come here and do a foundation course is because they read one of those things. And so I'm very happy to just dedicate the next however many like good years I have left to pulling back and doing that small, simple work and trying to bring a few more plants and insects to a more holistic presentation so that they can be seen on their own terms.
All right. Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. There's such a grandiose vision that comes from what you do, but also uh a deep humility that I really appreciate because it is
Mm-hmm.
just like, well, I'll just work on this little niche here, and that's fine. So it's like the biggest vision, but also a very humble practice, which I really appreciate because I think, especially with environmental stuff, sometimes everybody is so like, I need to solve all the world's biggest problems. Like, well, maybe, tend to these spaces that you have, and your thing might just be insects and plants. Maybe your thing is just animals or just cows in particular, whatever. And get your space. So I appreciate the mixture of grandiosity and humility. That's a really hard kind of needle to thread there. How do you have a really big vision but practice it in your daily life?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you're doing exactly that and inviting other people to participate in that. So it means a lot to me. It's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, is because I get to talk to folks like you, and it makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Because things are pretty
Yeah,
crazy right now. And then you meet people who are like doing good work. You're like, I think we're gonna be okay.
yeah.
And it's a weird feeling. I don't like to admit it. Nobody's in the room with me, so I'll say it. Gives me hope.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so you're doing hopeful work. Don't tell anybody I said that. I try to be the cool pessimist in the room.
Yeah.
Things are going terrible. Like, nah, things are going really good. And the regenerative capacities of nature are something you can't really shut down. So even in the darkest times, there's a lot of light.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really,
And
really appreciate that.
even, can I say a pessimistic, optimistic thing
Yeah.
on that note? I again, there's something like fundamentally Midwestern about me. The idea of trying to change too much was never the idea of changing the world. I don't think was even like conceivable as an idea. And there's something I think very yeah, catatonicizing
Mm,
about that. It immobilizes, it can immobilize you and can become purely overwhelming. And there's something really um, not freeing, but exciting and enlivening of saying, well, not. not everything has to change in order for some beautiful, good, worthwhile thing to happen here. There are like many things are going horrifically, and that is true, and that is terrible. And oh, it is great that there are people working on a systemic level to try to be addressing and overturning those. Um,
Hmm.
but in the meantime, we were always already in the meantime. We're in a
Mm,
state of polycrisis now, but we were always in the meantime. I mean, historically, that
yeah.
you have the small thing in front of you, and to say there's this environmental philosopher Arizim Kohak, who's yeah like Thoreau mixed with Husserl, I would say, and he in this book The Embers and the Stars would constantly insist on the timelessness of true good deeds. That he
Mm,
put it something like the a truly good deed is scribed onto eternity,
mm,
by which he means, even in a temporal way, if something good and beautiful has been done, even if it lasts for only a year, only a month, only a day, only a moment, it will always have been good and
yeah,
always have been worth doing.
yeah.
And if we just let that sense of present focused moral mindfulness without being Pollyanna-ish and acknowledging the destructive things, but just to say the destructive badness does not get to own every sub narrative. We can do good and just giving an activity. Mary Oliver said, "Attention is the beginning of devotion." Just
Mm,
giving fully of ourselves in an act of attention to like this I'm looking at sumac outside, this sumac right here, right, this red admiral butterfly right here, these colored shadows right here, is an act of devotion
yeah.
that will have always been worth doing no matter what happens.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, I mean, you're killing me here. Uh okay, two things. First, man, we got to talk some more. And so I definitely want to have you back on and chat more. I love your perspective. I love the work you're doing. So we got to chat more because I could easily talk for several more hours with you. Second, give us like a word or a phrase to go out on. I like to give people kind of the last word. It could be one word, could be a phrase, it could be a run-on sentence,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been such a good time hanging out with you, and I'm like I said, excited to chat more later. I absolutely love all the stuff you're doing. So for now, give us a word, a phrase. It's funny because especially with like academics, I'll say this and I'll be like, give me a word or a phrase to end the podcast episode, and we'll talk for like a minute and a half. I'm like, I was trying to be succinct and like, but I get it. We are wordy people by nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm making this a long explanation because I'm imagining that
To make it
this,
short.
yeah, I'm giving you time to think of a short thing. And so give like Ryan Shea, it's been a delight talking to you. Give us a word or a phrase to take us out.
That I will end with a quote from Goethe.
Oh, beautiful.
As human beings, we know ourselves only insofar as we know the world. We perceive the world only in ourselves, and ourselves only in the world. And here's the ending phrase: every new object, clearly contemplated, opens up a new organ in us. Every new object, clearly contemplated, opens up a new organ in us.